later, you'll be able to do that. And with that, the only other thing I'd like to talk about is encouraging everyone who isn't a member to join us at the Cashmere Goat Association. And Christine, did you set up a link for that so that people could join?
Yes, we'll put that in the chat, a link for the membership, and both the chat dialogue and this video and program will be on the CGA website under the educational tab.
Okay, great. All right, so if you have questions, stick them in there. Joe David Ross is an amazing gift to all of us. And his family homesteaded in Sonora, Texas in 1892. And it's the Ross family farm and the Ross Ranch, excuse me, Joe David. And he has been on there. It's about 175 miles west of San Antonio. It's a rocky, semi-arid terrain, which is great country for goats. And they have raised Angora goats as well as Cashmere goats over the years. Joe David grew up with 4-H, working with the family Angora goats, and over the years became well known as a judge of Angora goats, Cashmere goats, and even Boer goats. In fact, at one time, he was the only person in the world certified to judge both Cashmere, Angora, and Boer goats. He worked in South Africa with them. Graduating from Texas A&M Veterinary School in 1959, he was practicing as a veterinarian and also working on the farm. And he, just find my notes here. He served on boards for various goat associations and health boards for them, as well as working with our government and working in textiles all over the world. So he's got a very, very broad background, and he's well respected everywhere. In fact, he was invited to talk with Senator Leahy in Washington when he went down with some issues that he had there. And that's the kind of respect that he has in the fiber world and in the ranching world as well. Joe David also is the founder of the Cashmere Cooperative, where growers could send their fiber in and getting it processed and then working together to sell products. And he invested a lot of time, energy, and money in trying to help the cashmere get going in this country. And we're all very thankful to him for all that he has given to us in our efforts to raise cashmere goats. He's a hero for us, and he's our most revered founder of the cashmere in the United States. So with that, Joe David, we welcome you. Maybe like you to start talking first about the history, the story of cashmere in this country.
Okay, it's great to be here this evening. I'm already embarrassed that I've got a good excuse for this severe Texas winter storm has really put us behind, and I don't have as much details as I would like to have, and then the time frame. So I'm going to talk pretty, I hope I don't talk too fast, but in reference to the history, really what's made the cashmere industry what it is, and the main thing is that we're still going. And people like Wendy and Robert, Pam, Yvonne Taylor, Linda Cartwright, it's just amazing. And Yvonne Sweeter, I remember when she was just a young lady holding her first goats. I think it was at the Denver Stock Show, wasn't it, Yvonne? But it's been the team effort, really. But where it started was in Cashmere Producers of America, started in Colorado. And that's where, thanks to the gentleman from Forte Cashmere out of Rhode Island, but through the efforts of Ron Schutze and Jill Darrow. And then later they started the Cashmere Co-op in Colorado. And they brought Terry Stems over from Colorado, from Australia. And I'm not going to go into all of this detail because we got an hour and we need some questions and other input. But Pam wrote up a real good article in Hoofprints in March of 2020 on page 12 and 13, which kind of describes some of the early history. Then, as we know, we've been very fortunate to have Linda Cartwright all of these years writing that wonderful magazine, and how she could write that, just like it sounded real simple to write all that information and travel everywhere. And so for some reason, in the true name of the American Cashmere Co-op is, I had to look this up, the American Cashmere Goat Marketing Co-op. And it was involved with marketing live meat goats also, and encouraged the grazing of the goats in the city of Denver there and around. But for whatever reason, they decided to come to Texas and with Terry Sims. And one reason they came to Sonora, the Sonora Wool House is the largest warehouse of wool and mohair in the United States. The volume is down way lots, a whole lot now. But we were also having the Englishmen come over to grade alpaca. And then Terry Sims came, and he was already had created great interest. And James Barton from Sonora. And then my son-in-law, Bob Buckholz, was really the first Texas producer to really get involved in the 80s with cashmere on a commercial basis. And I know when I start mentioning a few names, I'm going to offend some people by leaving some out. I'm going to try to get to some facts too. But we'll talk about the co-op just briefly now. I want to say this and just be blunt. I do not encourage farmers, ranchers, producers to try to create a co-op business. There's a lot of success out there that we hear about, but we don't hear about those that are very difficult. I always appreciated Maryland and West Ackley, Linda Cartwright, Mandy Wall from Washington, different ones. We came to Sonora, Texas, and that wasn't easy to get there. And we had this expert from the USDA to work with us on establishing a co-op, how to make it more productive. And he really helped us. And we did. But the problem, and I'm not being against co-ops, I just don't want to falsely encourage people to rah-rah, get in there. The most success I have seen in any of the fiber deals is that one or two individuals putting their money there all together, but they had control of it and they worked like the devil. Whether it was wool, mohair, or what. And like in Texas, we had that slaughterhouse plant there in San Angelo. You're seeing publicity now. The folks from out west have bought it. But two groups of our Texas ranchers are real leaders, and they went kaput. But the unity that we still have, that's the main thing, is communication. And I want to talk briefly about, I'm proud that Wendy and others have established the Cashmere Goat Registry. And I want to encourage us to think of all types of goats. That's what we've got to do to work together to survive. And my thinking is that there's all types of registries for sheep, goats, cattle. I would suggest going the simplest route possible. And then like Dr. Reed Redden, who's in charge of our San Angelo Research and Extension in Sonora, following Dr. Walker, who's still involved and made a big difference when he came to Texas, back to Texas, when all the budgets were being cut from the USDA. But there's also a program that we can get the information later, where you keep, instead of just being in the performance test, you keep records on all of your goats in your own herd. Now, a lot of people aren't going to do that. They're not going to do that. So I think a registry, in my opinion, and Pam may agree with me on this, that make the registry as simple as possible to get more people involved, and then encourage more detailed collection of information on your own herd. Pam, was it your goats that got out and ran around at Rhinebeck one year?
That's right.
You
We
were-
lost one of my does. Very good memory. Francine.
Gracious Pete. But somehow that goat came back late in the afternoon. Finally, I can't
You did.
remember. I've been there judging 2 or 3 times, but I sure remember that goat getting out, and we were all embarrassed how our supposedly gentle cashmere goats jumped out of the sheep and goat pens. But so I want to briefly touch on the scorecard. We're not going to go into any details. Whatever the scorecard is, what's important is what are your goals for your flock? And what I think is lacking in our scorecards, whether it's Angora goats, Boer goats, or whatever, we're not culling and sifting enough. I'll never forget judging, maybe it's the first Fort Worth Boer goat show years ago. And reading, I mentioned this scorecard just about the culling. It's very embarrassing to get up to the top 4 or 5 goats. And then you decide to look at the teeth for offset, not matching up perfect. Or you haven't looked at the udder, and then, my gosh, here's this 5-year-old nanny. And it's obvious she's never raised a kid in her life, but she's pretty, But we got to have production. That's very important. Or you look at a billy goat that has 1 testicle, or one. We're seeing more and more that are smaller now, the size of the testicle, and one is larger than the other, not just the split. So what I'm getting at, whether it's back at home, working on your own goats, look at the entire goat and the entire scorecard. In the Angora goat deal, we don't even have a crooked tail on the scoreboard, not even 1 point. But we'll have judges and breeders say, oh, I couldn't place this goat up higher, it has a crooked tail. Well, the crooked tail in itself isn't bad. If a nanny's had twins or triplets carrying them in pregnancy, well, that one little kid could be squished up against the pelvis, and yet a crooked tail can be hereditary too. When I see a crooked tail, I'm going to look at the steep rump and see if they're cowhocked. That's what's important about a crooked tail. But don't let any one trait overpower your prejudices, or when I mention your goals. And I want to mention, a lot of people just pick one trait that they want to improve genetics in their herd. Oh, I don't know if some of you have heard of Mr. McBride in Oklahoma. Years ago, he had raised swine and would go to the Iowa State performance test and had the champion hog every year. And he said, Joe David, boy, I was proud I had these top gaining swine pigs. But he said, in 3 or 4 years, I wasn't raising very many pigs. We lost the fertility. So it's important not to just focus on one trait. You can focus on too many. And let's not forget the body in cashmere. As you all well know, meat is worth a heck of a lot now. And if I had to pick one thing on the scorecard, one thing, it would be the heart girth and rib cage. Some of you have heard my stories about when I did embryo transplants back in the mid-'80s and had picked 3 of my best Angora does. Bred with 2 great billy goats, I thought. And by gosh, we got, had we put them in transplants, nannies, that had raised good single kids. But we got so many embryos that we had to put twins and triplets implanted. And I expected every one of those kids to be just the best. I sold several of them the first time I got a chance to sell weaned kids down the road at Junction. Genetics varies even within their own type genetics, what I'm getting at. But I went back and studied those. Why were some big? Why were some 3 or 4 pounds weight and some then 6 or 8 pound weights at birth? One was the high performance test and go to the Angora performance test. I went back and looked at their carrier, the mother where the embryo was put in. You can see I get lost for words sometimes. And I noticed those that had the big heart girth raised those twins and triples that did well. But those little old narrow chested things that look pretty, you know, and they may have beautiful cashmere. And it's your privilege to keep a few goats around that you like for special reasons. They were a little pet or whatever. But I always remember what a veterinarian, when I was at the veterinary bovine meeting years ago, a dairyman from Arizona said, give reasonable care to all of your livestock, reasonable care, and sift those that do not stand up, that don't have to be favored all the time. I used to go out to look at somebody's herd of 1,000, 5,000 sheep or goats, and they'd call me out there, they'd neglected, they were wormy or weren't feeding enough mineral salt or whatever, stomach worms. But they were staking those 30 or 40 Doggy Sanchos and spending all their time raising those 30 or 40 Dogies, partly because their mothers didn't have good udder structure. So I'm talking fast here. So we're going to talk a little bit about judging. If you're judging, my point is the sifting committee sometime will let you down. So you as a judge, make sure you look at those teeth, those udders, those testicles, and watch them walk some. Okay. It's embarrassing if you don't to get up to that championship drive, and then you decide to look at the teeth and there's a paired mouth goat that you've already placed first place. The sifting committee lets you down. I remember judging there at Fort Worth, and I may be repeating myself there. This boar goat was a nice looking doe, but I sifted her. You do that early if you can. You may not be able to look at every teeth. And after the show, the gentleman came up to me and he was very polite. He said, Joe David, Mr. Ross, he said, thank you. He said, you don't know it, but this doe has been grand champion at 2 other major shows. And nobody ever looked at her teeth. It's those hereditary things. And then a cashmere goat that I bought because he was champion in Texas. I think maybe Chris McGuire was there doing the judging. And it was one imported from New Zealand. I bought that goat. I knew it had a folded ear. And folded ears are hereditary, and they don't have a real economic trait. But my point is, the reason I don't have many cashmere goats now, I just can't, because of the drought, I really cut down on my size, but I'm keeping some of them. There's something about cashmere. But the reason I was going to send some good gray ones to Wendy and Peter, then there's some friends out in the West Idaho, Oregon, that had some red cashmere. But I ended up 2 and 3 generations later with several with a folded ear. What I'm getting at, be honest with yourself about genetics. Something I would like to see added to the scorecard is disposition. You know, cattle, they with the cattle, they score those bulls on disposition, or if a steer or let them out the chute, they're going to get rid of maybe even that steer's mother or sire. We run our cashmere goats, except when we're separating them out for breeding with our Angors. All of our registered Angors are with the commercial goats, except when we divide them up for a certain billy goat. And I do not know why. Because we use the Bud William technique. We don't chouse our goats or anything real fast. But we have not been able to raise a gentle cashmere goat. So I want to encourage you to think about that. There's a difference between, being in that pen there where you can catch them, and then just really start observing disposition. Another thing is the guard hair. You remember when we started out here in Texas? Well, we thought that old guard hair, that's in the way. That's expensive to get out. So we first, in our ignorance, we picked those few goats that didn't have much guard hair. But we learned after dehairing and making yarn and so forth that guard hair is there to guard the fiber in it. But we don't want it too long, as you well know. So the difference between an Angora and cashmere is ounces for cashmere and pounds for Angora goats. So I think that we all need to look at density of true cashmere on our goats and not just get hung up on, like some people do, the finest haired one. And a lot of milk goats will have cashmere, but it's just an inch or inch and a quarter long, but you could use them in your genetic program. And in my resume, I wrote in there about Jamaica, judging down there. For two reasons I'm mentioning this. And I know I'm jumping around some, but I've got dyslexia, so I've got a good excuse. But, we Americans, we talk about how fair we are and fair trade, and we want to help people. We've all seen different things. But Canada paid me to go to Jamaica to put on a workshop with sheep, boar goats, and some cashmere. I'll never forget driving in, they drove me into town, and my gosh, not wild goats, but everybody had goats in their backyard, and they just crossed the road, went back and forth. And there went a pygmy goat. I could tell it had really a great cover of density, cashmere. I know one time in Oregon we made a pygmy goat champion fiber goat. So cashmere can be anywhere. But back to Jamaica. So when I go out of state, and I'm not traveling out of state anymore, but I would say, all right, I want somebody to help me get lined up for 2 or 3 days before or after the workshop and show, so I can go visit ranches and farms and see herds and learn about their grazing. It took me out to this one man's cashmere ranch. It was a ranch. He couldn't be at the show. He was also president of the Jamaican Dairy Association. And so they had a conflicting date. And he was not very friendly. And the people that took me out there, I'm saying this for a reason. He said, well, I guess so-and-so here, you made him champion since he's picked you up at the airport and bringing you out here too. And of course I didn't. And finally, as we visited, he melted away. But why he was so disgusted, he said, the United States of America buys the farmer's milk and sends it to Jamaica at a reduced price below our cost. When we don't like for other people to do us that way, but we don't all really know all the circumstances where we as Americans need to do a better job. But I'll never forget that. And then I looked over there and I could see a housing development. And they didn't have socialism there, but they did have a housing development to help people. And I said, well, how do you keep them from coming over here and stealing your goats? He said, they know I'll shoot them. But The other thing interesting about Jamaica was you had to land in Cuba to change flights. And gosh, there were a lot of people there to see Castro. In other words, Canada was glad that we weren't trading with those people, Cuba and all of them, but Canada was smart enough to be trading down there. So I think we want to keep an open mind. Let's talk briefly. Wendy had mentioned something about, and Christine, about training, getting more judges. And you just have to start out. In general, think about our owner, potential judge should at least own maybe goats 2 or 3 years. And then you have your leaders, they may not be certified, but they've been judging some. And gosh, we've been lucky to have Wendy and Peter judging all around. I can remember, thank heaven, Marilyn and Wes would go all over the United States judging, and I learned a lot from Wes. Actually, I'm not the one that's been out there in the front of all this at all, but with the Angora goats to be certified, you have to be nominated by the board of directors. And then you work side by side with the certified judges at some county shows, regional shows, or the big shows. And then later on, the board of directors would vote to accept you or not. But everybody has a different way of going about it. But the point I want to make on the judging is, what do you think, Linda? Cartwright. You're on the left hand of my screen there. But anyway, I want to encourage you, like if you're at Rhinebeck or wherever you are, down at Maryland or in Oregon, some of those great shows, go around and listen to the sheep judge, the Angora goat judge, the milk dairy goats, the boar goat judges, and watch them make their selections and listen closely to their reasons. And whenever you see the name Preston Ferris judging, you all know that name? He's judged more shows. I can't say this officially, but been around a little while. He's probably judged more goat and sheep shows, plus some cattle shows, than anybody in the world. I'm talking about Australia, Canada, Mexico, just in Europe. But he gives great reasons. So if Preston Ferris or his son are giving judging show while you're there with your goats, go over there. And I remember judging at the English show, you know, there, whatever they called it then, in the early 90s. And as soon as I got through judging the goats, I took off and went and looked at the cattle. And that's where I found out about the South Devon cattle. And then I went and looked at the sheep judging. And golly, in America, we have larger sheep, but their South Downs and Merinos were real small. So we really learn from other people, not just from Cashmere people or just what your special species is. But I'll never forget being my first year there at Rhinebeck. I want to encourage us, if I can make one point today, I want to encourage us as ranchers and farmers and producers to respect other people's thoughts and their other opinion. But we have got to work together as sheep and goat breeders. We need each other. The land needs sheep and goats. We broke to go get a hamburger at the stand, and we were standing in line there. Somebody from New York was taking me to lunch. And there were 2 men standing in front of us that turned back and said, "What are you doing? What do you have here?" We said, "Goats." "Oh, goats." And they got up and they walked off and got out of line and got away from us. Those sheep people just didn't like us. And heck, most of us out here, you know, sometime or another have both sheep and goats. I'd like to encourage you to reach out. Because like I couldn't have met Senator Leahy and his top ag aide for the incentive program for wool and mohair I don't remember the gentleman's name, but I called Vermont and I said, get me and make a personal contact, tell them that I'm going to be in Washington. And that's how I got to work with Senator Leahy, and we made some progress. But I'll never forget that situation there at Rhinebeck. So that's going to bring up the subject. Time-wise, where are we? Yeah. Anyway, going to bring up the subject of scrapies. A lot of us don't want to do that. Ear tag our goats or anything, but sheep and goats around the world, when it comes to scrapies, are together genetically in the way the prions or whatever you want to call it. You know, it's a little different from mad cow disease, and then it's different from chronic wasting disease, but they're in that same family. So the sheep people have gone to all of this trouble. We've had different programs over the years. I won't go into that. But we have to go 7 years without a case. We pretty well got it cleaned up with the sheep. I hadn't found any scrapies in goats in Texas in a long time. But a lot of states and growers still, and auction rings still aren't requiring the goats to be tagged where we can test them. And one problem is because of the people that don't buy them at market, just slaughter them. I've got an 85-year-old senior out of blank all of a sudden. But scrapies is very important. I talked to Dr. Diane Sutton in Washington the other day just to keep up to date. And she said, we're really narrowing down that COVID-19 has kind of interfered some with finishing it up, but it'll be ongoing. So reach out to your local committees and ask your local state sheep organization how many of their members raise goats also. We need each other. And the American Goat Federation, I'm so tickled when Wendy told me and Christine that our Cashmere group is still paying membership into the American Goat Federation. It's really easy to say we're not getting much done because a lot of people say, heck, don't think goats bring more money than anything by the pound. Well, why do I need to be a member of an organization? But we've got to be organized. In the last 3 or 4 years ago, Ag USDA bill, there wasn't $1 set aside specifically for goat research. That's our fault. We've got to work with our sheep people and be more visible in Washington. And the American Goat Federation is the way to do that. Marvin Shirley from Sonora, Texas, 51 years old when he died. He had a whole lot with getting that original organization going. So de-herring, oh, that's their downfall. You remember when I first started talking, and y'all tell me, kind of hold up a hand, somebody, or 5 when I got 5 minutes left.
Joe David, you might want to, because we want to have some time for questions as well, but you might want to focus a little bit on fiber characteristics before we turn it over.
Okay, and I've mentioned some on that, but of course the main thing is as you know, is that crimp just goes out of control, and that helps it tie together. And then we want micron fineness, of course. And you've heard of the tertiary fiber. It's not a guard hair. It's not the true cashmere, but it's just a plain old simple fiber in there. Sometimes you don't see it real easy. I would encourage you to wear a dark sleeve shirt, or I call it the necktie test, and compare the uniformity of the fiber on the goat's neck, side, and down on the bridge. But the important thing, in my opinion, is you got to have adequate staple length. We need to stress density more. And because it does sell on weight. And then I've gone back and thank heaven Paul Johnson and Linda Fox. I remember stopping by and visiting with them one time, and I was so impressed with their big gray cashmere goats. And then I think, Winnie, didn't y'all end up with getting one of those? But anyway.
Yeah, we came to visit you, Joe David, in Sonora,
Silverbird.
and you had said you'd been to that farm and seen the handsomest goat that you'd ever seen, and that was when we had just bought him, Silver Bart.
Yeah.
He was a good boy.
But we do need guard hair, not too long, of course. And I don't know, I'm not talking maybe enough about the fiber, but you've got to get hands on yourself and use that scorecard. And every time you see 2 or 3 goats at home or at a show, visiting somebody, judge them. Like Jean Edmond, we were up in Oklahoma one time putting on a workshop. She was a great goat lady. And so as a judge, you want to encourage people, not a lot of judges just talk about the top 2 or 3, especially in big classes. And like Jason Bonoski here, a mohair and wool buyer, raised on the ranch right down the road. He's real good about talking to this youngster, and then they will come along and go tell the parents what the judge said. But Gene Edmond said, even if you have to tell that owner, that goat, before you send it across the aisle that's no longer in the judging ring, in the lineup, you sure have a beautiful halter on that goat. And then don't send one person over there to stand by themselves another 4 or 5 minutes before you send another one. Look at that whole group as you've gone down the line. Give everybody a fair chance. Look with the necktie test, because uniformity is real important. But do not forget the body. Now, the dehairing comes back to fiber quality. And we have, right now, I'm not aware of us having a commercial process in dehairing in Texas. But at Independence, Texas, the Brown family has their own, they work processed wool and mohair, some alpaca. They scour their own, some cashmere and dehair. But as you know, it's very, very expensive, time consuming to repeat it and slow. But when we lost Forte Cashmere in Rhode Island and they went to China, that's what happened to the co-op. We couldn't be getting larger volumes dehaired easily. But the Forte people really would take individual fleeces and send back an individual report there in the early years. But
Joe David,
I
maybe,
don't know if,
how about if we go over to some questions? Is that okay with you?
good, that's fine. Yes, because I've rambled too much.
That's why we
Great.
love you.
No, that's great. Cindy.
That's just excellent.
Great.
Danielle.
Yeah, so we've been getting lots of questions so far. The main one I keep getting over and over again is if you have any nutritional guidance that is specific to cashmere goats.
Okay. Not specific to cashmere goats, but a gentleman has helped me for over 30 years collecting forage samples. I would encourage you to have a good mineral program, and there's deficiencies all around. And so I'm a veterinarian rancher out here in Southwest Texas. It's very important. I'm so glad to see Cornell, Maryland, Virginia, LSU, other universities, California, Colorado, under their climatic conditions to work with the local breeders. I would encourage you to have as much grazing as possible. And you better have a good fence, you know. But try not to feed everything out of the bag. Like we feed a lot of whole cottonseed here, but Mr. Kent Mills has been is with High Pro now, owned by the Canadian firm. But he's collected those samples over the years. In certain times of the year, you'll have high calcium, high potassium and low phosphorus. Some people have selenium deficiency. So consult with your local people, not just the feed store, but learn to read the feed tag on your minerals. Minerals are so expensive now. And then you want to remember that a goat is for roughage. But on a lot of properties, you finally graze down some of those weeds or the brush, and then there's just more grass there. And goats will eat grass, as we all know, but we don't think of them that way. Every region has their own deal. Remember, goats, since they have a faster GI tract metabolism, they're going to, in general, eat 4 pounds per 100 pounds of body weight. So that's
Thank you.
another day-long discussion.
The audience also asked, where do you get your fiber tested?
Okay, the fiber tested, of course, I used to use McCall, and then been fortunate right here at San Angelo, Texas, and I have on my notes here to point out, Texas A&M Research and Extension. It's San Angelo, Texas, 90 miles from our ranch. It already has had a lab that is tested for some of y'all, but they're setting it up as a national lab now to help approval for wool, mohair, cashmere, alpaca, and Dr. Reed Redden and Mr. Dr. Pope will be in charge of that. So I think their telephone number is 325-655. I forgot it down there. But anyway, you can find that pretty easy. And it is important to get some testing done. But I want to encourage you on the necktie test, or you hold it up to look at the cashmere. If you can't see it, it's fine. You don't have to be an expert at saying 13, 15, 17 micron. Uniformity is probably more important, and then a number of crimps per one inch. But don't forget the body.
Great. You mentioned before that you prefer a shorter guard hair. What would you consider as too long for your guard hair?
Well, we used to say we did not want the guard hair over 2.5 times longer than the fiber. And that's like the Boer goats will not have much guard hair, but I've got some that did or have by crossbreeding. And then some of the dairy goats don't have much guard hair, but they have beautiful cashmere. So you breed a longer haired fiber cashmere goat to a good dairy goat, and you can get some of that fineness you're looking for. But I don't think it has to be 2.5 times. I don't want it 2 times longer if I could get away from it, but you need that guard hair to that's the number. Okay. The number of the San Angelo lab is 325-653-4576. But did I answer that enough? You can just hold it up.
Yes, thank you.
I don't know if you can see this.
I can't. No, maybe not. I'll send a picture to Christine.
It's showing goats with a good straight wide hind leg, and that's not just for showmanship. But what's
Great.
next?
Thank you. So another question we have is, how has the recent severe weather that you've experienced in Texas impacted your goat and sheep herds?
All right. I've been so pleased the way our goats and sheep have held up, because this cold spell, well, it's bad. And it's not because of ERCOT or whether you're Republican or Democrat or CNN or Fox News. I wish they'd quit criticizing people. But anyway, the sheep and goats ate the snow and the ice. But our cattle was really hard on the cows with calves. And then what really surprised me, our biggest predator and parasite in our particular area in different parts, not just Texas, is the axis deer. They have just overtaken us in the past few years. They were imported, not by us, but and they froze to death. We're finding them in our barns or open sheds. Just makes you feel so sad. They're a big fat animal, but they for some reason couldn't handle the cold weather. But thank heaven. And that's the one I've got written down here. When I think you need, talking about the future, I think we need to reach out to our meat goat friends for crossbreeding purposes. If you ever been to the auction ring and seen fresh shorn Angoras or boar goats, normal boar goat, night or two there before the auction, just shaking to death. And a little old kid born that's half cashmere, they're going to survive that cold winter out in the pasture. And then like this weather, that cashmere keeps animals warm. And I think we need to stress that, because more and more meat goat people are going to a crossbred, not just the straight boar goat. And so let's get in touch with them, your neighbors in your area. I used to advertise boar cash goats.
Thank you. Can you give your thoughts on combing versus shearing as a method for harvesting cashmere?
Well, there's no, before you shut me up completely, that's a good tie in here, what I'm fixing to say. Please do not take this wrong about my speaking up against part of PETA's wanting to put the cashmere and the mohair people out of business. I don't know if some of you know this, but so combing is easier on the animal when you, in some ways, but you're having to hold them a longer time. It takes a lot of time. So out here on a commercial basis, we would simply share them. So it takes a good sharer, but James Martin, he passed away 2 years ago here. So you remember he was a champion sharer there at Denver 3 or 4 years. But if you have the time to comb, certainly that puts you ahead on the dehairing, and it's in some ways doesn't scare the goat. But really, when you're tying an animal up or setting them on the rear end and shearing them, it's amazing how most of them don't struggle. But PETA went around in South Africa unknowingly to ranches over there while they were shearing, and supposed to even pay the shearers to cut some of them. It showed the select pictures of certain goats, blatant and all this, and dragging them by hind leg, which is in. So they've gone to all the 12 biggest international stores, but they put it off now in 2022 not to use mohair unless we have third-party inspection, and cannot we cannot kill predators that are killing our livestock. For me to tell somebody that they don't have the right to protect their animals from a predator killing them, I don't understand that. But I do respect other. We know there's good members of PETA, and some of you may be on that side of the equation. I'm just bringing this up. And then they're out to put the cashmere people in Mongolia out of business because of overgrazing. I think they ought to go try to help them more. We've been trying to help them. But so most of y'all would know more about combing and sharing. Out here, the only way we could do it economically is to share them.
Thank you. This isn't a
We use guard
question.
dogs.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Continue your thought, please.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to share a comment from Linda Courtwright on the chat. She said, I really want to acknowledge what everyone already knows, that American Cashmere would not have survived without Joe David's tireless commitment, inspiration, and overall love of animals. I am forever grateful that he's helped me make the decisions to become the type of cashmere farmer that was right for me. Thank you, Joe David.
Thank you for doing so much, Linda. It's amazing. Well, not easy what you've done traveling the world and writing for us. That's what it's been, is teamwork.
I think it might be, there might be a few people around who've known Joe David who would also like to add a comment or two to him. I think that would be really nice. I don't know how we make that happen. Maybe Wave and Christine can, like Pam, handle.
Oh, well, I'm just delighted to hear from you again, Joe David. I have such wonderful memories of all the shows where we met, and yeah, you taught me a lot, and you kept the whole thing going. That's I'll always be grateful for that too.
Thank you.
Jane Hammond.
Hi, Joe David. I'm forever grateful for your wonderful trip to Virginia to check out some of my animals and other people's animals that came from up in New England. It was a terrific insight into the world of raising cashmere goats. And I'd love to have you come back. So come back east to Virginia.
And I'd love to, and I had your name written down here. And those of you who've ever been to Jane's property, that was a wonderful workshop we had there. And it was the history of her property, but her enthusiasm for cashmere goats is just something else. And then that's where one of those tapes was made, you know, that gentleman did a good job of that day, I thought.
I moved across the river, Joe David, to another farm.
Have you?
Yep. And we're almost finished kidding.
Wow.
That's a beautiful property in that area.
Is Yvonne on?
I just,
But 1 second, Linda. Is Yvonne on? No, go ahead, Linda.
Joe David, I have this one question that I may have known at some point, but it's gone now. Who is responsible for originally deciding that cashmere goats should come to the US back in 85, 86, I think it was? Was that a private enterprise? Was that a government-based decision? How did that transaction ultimately come about?
Well, I'm going to have to call my son-in-law Bob Buckholz, but it goes back to Bron Schutze and Jill Dara is my memory, because when I was over in Australia a couple of times judging, well, I made a special effort to go to the cashmere property where they imported those, what's my understanding, maybe the first goats from Australia.
Okay.
And then later on, I imported 3 billies from Australia. And then earlier before that, we imported, you know, the first boar goats directly in the United States with some Angora goats that came from directly from South Africa. But I think it's Bron Schutze and Jill. And then they really started the national Cashmere Producers of America, is my memory, with other people. And of course, Marilyn actually can probably remember a whole lot of that I haven't remembered. And then the co-op started in Colorado through the same people. And they made a cashmere show at the National Western Stockman there at Denver Stock Show. Those things were all just kind of blended together, but it's the exact dates and time, I'm embarrassed, I don't know.
Got it. Thank you.
Hey, Joe David, Tom Boyer, can you hear me?
Hello, Tom. Golly.
Hey.
Good to see you.
Hey, it's great to have you doing this, and the world needs to understand that you're largely responsible for the American Goat Federation and all the support you've given over the years. Thank you to that effort, as well as to all of these others that you've done. You've been an amazing friend to the goat world in general. Thank you.
Thank you. And this guy's the one that stayed right there and got to be, made it really official.
So David, when did Chris McGuire come into that chronological history that you mentioned?
What's that now?
When did Chris McGuire get engaged in
Oh,
the
okay. Chris, I want to say she was real soon after Colorado got it going, but because
It's okay.
Chris came, we ended up with some, when I say we, Texans in general, with some of her goats. But you remember one of our national meetings was in her town there in Wyoming, and Chris was just in her region, and not just her region, but she had a tremendous impact in Texas and all over. Shame to say I haven't been in touch, but but she made a big difference. And like I say, Paul Johnson and Linda Fox and the Doolins, you know, gosh, they were maybe the first ones.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Shelton and Robert Kinsey in Texas with our researchers at the extension and there's San Angelo and research. They started, darn idiots, they started working with Spanish goats that had cashmere on them, you know. I mean, those Spanish goats were just wild animals that are still hard to round up. But they were leaders, they were visionary. Robert Kinsey and Maurice Shelton, Dr. Shelton. Dr. Shelton's in his 90s, he's still alive. Talked to him 2 or 3 months ago. I want to encourage you about our San Angelo lab. It's always been a good one, and it's getting, what you say, more national support now. Do we have time for me to point out 1 or 2 other things? Or really, questions are more of interest to people. Is there?
So David, why don't you go ahead if people are comfortable with that? And if anybody leaves, we all appreciate it. Everybody, even who has to leave now. Thank you very much. So go ahead, just go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Talking about, just briefly, I want to come up with an acronym that I came up with. You know, my sister is, we have a company called Texas Sustainable Growth, 20 years over that, past there. Now everybody's using the word sustainable, you know, and soil health, but they don't know why. But, or if you say organic, or I'm an environmentalist, you draw a line in the sand. So I've come up with, call myself a balancer. Whatever business you're in, you got to balance things. So that's B. And then R is the next one. That stands for respect and responsibility. And that's what I've tried to allude in a conversation about working with other people. And there's good people in PETA. I just had to say this because it has become an issue. But we need to respect other people's. It doesn't do any good for us to go just to the Texas sheep and goat raisers or to the Eastern Cashmere goat meetings. I mean, we're all there, you know, but we need to go and see those other sheep and goat people and work with the cow people, the wildlife people, our legislators. And then yes, you know, a lot of Texans and other people say, by God, this is my land and I'll do with it what I want to. And I'll be at a meeting, I'll say in semicolon, and you have the responsibility to respect your neighbor and not to interfere with their property. So that's BR. And then the third one, another one is A, for action. A lot of people go to goat shows and workshops and and still they haven't built a mile of fence. You know what I mean? You got to get out there and make mistakes, lose some of your own money, and get involved in your group. So action. And I showed that to my sister, Betsy Ross. I started a little grass-fed beef business, Betsy Ross grass-fed beef. And she looked at it, BRA. I hadn't thought about this. She said, nope, too sexist. That's bra. So I said, oh my gosh. And so I had already come up with another word, letter C. And that means communication with other people, not just ourselves, and character. Some people wear their religion on the shirt sleeve, that's fine. But I mean, a character has a whole lot to do. So that's the word brought. So Jimmy Cahill had the Sonora Mohair Company. He's an amazing person. We need to pray, Jimmy, for his long drawn out cancer, but he's got faith. I showed him that. I said, Jimmy, rearrange those words. What word would you come up as an acronym for balancer, respect, action, and communications character? He looked at it right quick. He said, crab. I said, oh my gosh, no, Jimmy. A lot of people already think I'm an old crab. But what I'm getting at, that deal, not because I came up with it, but I showed that to congressmen their age, and it is helps some of us sometime at a meeting to show more respect for other people's opinions. And I think that's really important. But what I'm getting at, when they tell us ranchers that we can't, and please take this wrong, but every area is different. Was a chemical called 1080 that you could put out and it would kill the cows. And they took that away from us. And certainly there's pros and cons. But what's so strange? In New York and Boston, in the welfare homes where there's a lot of rats, they used 1081. Same thing, same principle. In other words, we all see other people's faults, but not what, if we need it, it's a good thing. And then you remember when the birds come up from South America, they'll have salmonella, carry diseases or whatever, and bring them into the feedlots as they migrate and go back. But no, you can't, you're not supposed to do anything with those birds in your feedlot. And before Senator Kennedy died, I didn't really get to meet him. Would hear him talk. I'm just a third tier politician, so to speak. But I really gained a lot of respect for Ted Kennedy. But earlier I didn't.
Ted Kennedy.
Because they had a lot of seagulls out there on the coast at Boston or in Massachusetts. And it was okay for them to shoot them. And so we need to, that's where that respect and communication, I think, is so important. And then guard dogs certainly have their place. My son-in-law, Bob Buckholz, he and his brother were really young when they started with them, and they certainly have their place. But to tell something, you wouldn't let a bad guy come in and start killing people and say, you can't kill him or you can't capture him or anything. Anyway, I've rambled enough.
That's okay.
It's a good time.
Danielle, do you want to ask any more? Or do we want to wrap up?
We have one more question about hooves.
Ooh.
Okay.
If you care to comment about hooves.
And that's one thing I had written down here, but talking about sifting. When the hind feet curl up, that's not as bad, the toes. But the front one, when we call it a ridge toe, or if it's really a curl toe. And those of you that live in a higher moisture region, you have more foot rot and you got to trim the curl toes. So that's definitely a genetic trait that you want to select against. When there was the incentive program for mohair and wool, and it ended in 1991, and there's pros and cons to that. We had people in Arkansas and Missouri buying some of our billy goats, and indirectly a friend up there told me that people liked our goats, and I'm not trying to sell something, because we selected the genetics. They wouldn't have to trim their feet near as often. And I never really thought of that as being a selling point, but it's really important for you judges. You know, what the good breeder will do before it gets in the show ring, they're going to trim that hoof. So before you make one a champion, you might want to pick that hoof up and look and see how much it's been trimmed. Sometimes you can't tell if they did it earlier. But I mean, if you're just trimming a normal hoof, that's nothing wrong with that. But
Thank you. And I think Barbara wanted to say hello before we
Hi.
drop off.
Yeah, hi, Joe David. We did a lot of phone, we did a lot of phone calling in the 80s when we started off with this thing, and finally got to meet you at the state fair in California at an Angora goat show you judged. And I'm just glad to see you again. And I'm
Well,
still in with the
appreciate you.
goats.
Speaking of, there's
Right.
there's
And then-
something about goat people that draws us together.
Yeah,
Just, you might be interested to know that Joe David talked about Paul Johnson and Linda Fox and their farm. And they participated with their goats participated in an ad for Ford. And if you want to watch it, you go to Goat Ad Ford, and then they'll play the ad, but hang on, because then they show some of their bloopers. And the woman that was the trainer said, goats are really smart and they're really stubborn. So if you want to, it'd be a fun little wrap up for you. It's very entertaining. So Joe David, thank you so very much from every single one of us all around the world here and participating. Maybe if you're up for it, we'll do it again sometime.
All right. When you have another one, I want to get David Lee here to zoom us in. I can't even work a flip up very good.
You've done a wonderful job. And so thank you all for participating as well. And we're all clapping for you, even though you can't hear us.
Yeah, turn it on. You can hear.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Right.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.